But I want to start this conversation by asking Josh a really simple question. What was your vision for Common Ground, and why did you create this film? We can sit down, by the way, guys, with chairs.
Waiting for the invitation. Well, thanks, Kwasi, and thank you for hosting this incredible evening. Super cool. Excited about this panel. Some real intersectional thoughts around regeneration. I wish I could take credit for coming up with the idea for Common Ground. In some ways, excuse me, a lot of that credit goes to a guy named Ryland Engelhardt. Where's he? So Ryland and I were in community together in Venice, and we had done 3 films on alternative energy, oil. We being my wife, Rebecca, and myself. And Ryland kept saying, you've got to make a film on soil. And you know, from oil to soil is a real career downgrade. So I was like, I don't think we're gonna make a film on soil, Ryland. That's one of those mythical Venice things that happens maybe after a lot of mushrooms. But then all the rest of our community was like, you gotta make a film on soil. And that became Kiss the Ground, the first film, which premiered in 2020 on Netflix. And in 4 years, helped catalyze a radical shift in the United States toward awareness about regenerative agriculture. It was only because another person showed up and said, that was a good first film, kind of like that was a good first draft, but there should be a second one. And that needs to be a Sermon on the Mount about what's possible. And that gentleman's name was Eric Dillon, and I believe Eric is here as well. And then we had some other incredible people join that team, like the Bazukis, who are both here, Jan and Dave. And really, these films have been born by a community of people who wanted to see in action so many things. Corinne, who's been, we've worked together since 2008, right, Corinne? Yeah. These were, the concepts in the films are concepts inherent in the environmental movement. And the third film, Groundswell, which we're all working on together right now, takes those concepts to the next level. Because as we started to look at what does regeneration mean, all these other intersections from environmentalism, from the early 60s till now came into play. And unseen things like social justice, women's rights, just a whole different version of how we look at the environment. And that is what we hope to architect in the third film. But Common Ground and Kiss the Ground both come out on Amazon Prime on April 22nd, Earth Day. So we're super excited about that partnership, and we're hoping that all of you host screenings at your work, church, living rooms, bringing people who haven't seen these films and who don't know these concepts. So that's a little bit of the answer for that story. Thank you, Maxim. Yeah, appreciate it.
Wow. Literally life-changing movie. I think An Inconvenient Truth, is the only other film I can think of that even comes close to the potential that Common Ground has. So thank you for creating that. Our next panelist is an amazing young leader. I'm going to read her bio for those of you who aren't familiar with her. Sage Lenier is a climate activist, public speaker, and nonprofit leader. Recently, she was honored by Time magazine as one of the 10 2023 Next Generation leaders globally. While an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, she began teaching her record-breaking program, Solutions for a Sustainable and Just Future, which has enrolled 2,250 students. Sustainable and Just Future is now rapidly expanding to Generation Z, the education they need to become climate solutionists. Sage's work covers the circular economy, decarbonization, post-growth economics, community power, food system sustainable development, environmental justice, and more. seeking to offer a vision for what a better future could look like. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, the World Economic Forum, Antique Vogue, and she's been brought to speak at conferences, universities, and organizations around the world. And of course, to request her for a speaking gig, you can talk to her agent. Thank you for being here, Sage. I know you're busy, but it's really important, I think, for all of us to hear from your perspective as a leader of the next generation. How do you see this conversation unfolding? And I don't know if you've seen Common Ground yet, but from your perspective, what are the greatest challenges we face, and how can this room help you do your work better?
Thank you. Well, I have not seen it yet, but I am obsessed with the concept. I've read extensively about it. I just haven't sat down and watched it yet. Regenerative agriculture, food systems writ large, is a big part of my work because that's a big part of the roadmap to stabilizing the human population. I think the challenge that we face is, and this is something that I want to dig in really deep with you all about. We are doing a terrible job at agenda setting for the general public. You go around, you ask anyone, you ask your kid, your neighbor, your Uber driver, whoever, what they know about environmentalism. They know about recycling, they've heard of Greta Thunberg, electric vehicles, solar panels, and wind turbines. Maybe they've heard that veganism is better. We are doing a terrible job at agenda setting for the general public. We aren't offering a vision for what a better world could look like. And I think that's the common ground. Regenerative agriculture is starting to get into the meat of that and helping people buy in to a world that is happier, healthier, more joyful, and more culturally, beautiful and abundant. So, thank you. So my journey began, the reason I started teaching when I was in college was because I was so pissed off with the education I was getting. Every lecture was focused on the problem. And my professors had done decades of research on how bad the problem was and the extent of the problem and how much worse it's gonna get. And I was looking around myself and I was watching all these young people sort of like drop like flies. People were wilting, dropping out of the program, feeling hopeless. And not just at my school, I've heard that from people at Harvard, Oxford, UH Manoa. I've heard that from all people who are studying in South Africa. I've heard that all over the world at this point. The way that we reach people with focusing on the problem and expecting them to just get scared and figure out how to care and what change needs to be made, it's not working. We've done it since the 70s. We've made a lot of progress, but it's time for us to turn a new leaf as a movement and get solutions oriented, get action focused, stop focusing on the problem, and start offering people something that is more attractive, more affordable, more culturally relevant, more cool, more enjoyable, etc. Right? And we need to be focusing on carrots and not sticks. And so I started teaching because I wanted a solutions lens, and so I was trying to create the education that I wanted. And the reason that class became so huge at Berkeley, and we're still putting hundreds of people through the program every semester, even though I've graduated and moved on, is because people were starved for that kind of narrative. And we've seen the transformative impact that it's had on young people to go from, sort of like start here, you don't need any baseline knowledge, we'll take you everywhere, like all the way there. People are saying, I changed my major, I decided to start an organization, this was transformative for me, I know what role I want to play in solving the ecological crisis. And so I want to expand that. So I came to Sundance actually because me and a lawyer I've been working with, we're shopping an 8-episode docuseries of big picture adaptation of that curriculum. So I'm really excited I will be headed out really quickly, but I'm very excited to engage with all of you and to follow up with people who are interested in that idea because we're trying to bring it to life. And I really believe that if we just get the message right, if we just give people the right information, the right tools, they will take it, they will run with it, and it will become so much more than we could have ever imagined.
Somehow I feel better now. I don't know. I don't know about you guys. I think we're gonna be okay. So our third panelist is Michael Lemon, the founder of Bridge to Renewables, which is an amazing company that allows people to save money when they buy electric vehicles in California and Washington, Oregon, and potentially throughout the country going forward. You know, again, I asked this question earlier. We're in literally a new world, where now we have the Gulf of America and not the Gulf of Mexico. That wasn't a joke. That's actually what the State Department said this weekend. So, Michael, as an entrepreneur, you've always kind of focused on how regulation can create entrepreneurship. We know the private sector is going to be more and more important than ever in continuing the fight and the work that Common Ground and other climate-focused initiatives have done. So as an entrepreneur, with your new project, Low Carbon Initiative specifically, what's your outlook and what would you recommend other entrepreneurs do to actually further sustainability and drive the Sustainable Development Goals?
Thanks, Kwasi, for the intro. I am offering perspective. I just came from the Bipartisan Agriculture Inaugural Ball. And I gotta tell you, that room was full of bipartisan hope. And when Kwasi talked about Bridge to Renewables, I started that company actually protesting the Keystone Pipeline. And I was lucky enough to have a father that asked me the seminal question, if you're not for this, what are you for? Fast forward to today, Bridge to Renewables, we manage just under 500,000 cars across 13 different car manufacturers in California and a number of other states. And we connect them to aggregated wind, solar, and biogas. And that last bit, the biogas part, is really what led to my appreciation for how complicated the message that Common Ground distills. Because, you know, over the next 4 years, groups like this, round tables like this, and the conversations that we have around solutions, I think that's what's going to really propel us forward. So back to the biogas part. It's a word that honestly, when I walk into a room of people, very few people actually know what I am talking about. It gets really technical and they tune out. So I'll try to distill it simply. It works like your stomach. You get solids, you get gas. And that kind of technology on a farm enables a farmer to actually take a waste product, and turn it into the energy that helps power their farm itself, helping them move off of paying electricity bills to, you know, keep cows cool during the summer. You never believe how much a small dairy will spend on just running fans. And leaning into the biogas space, what I realized was that this technology, enabling a farmer to deal with waste and do things on his land, moving away from a large industry that Common Ground really gets into, fossil fuel-based pesticides and fertilizers, that gives me a lot of hope. It gives me hope for agency, and honestly, you know, when we think about technology and the agency it's given us, and you know, there were panels earlier about AI. I mean, I'm blown away by that technology, right? Every single Google that we have, all of the emails. Just imagine having that kind of shift in agency on a farm. And that's what gets me really excited about the next 4 years, is let's give farmers the agency to provide the food, fiber, fuel that our country needs, that the world needs, but also give them the freedom to do it on their own terms. That's what gets me excited about the next 4 years.
Yeah, well, you know, Michael, you're one of the most innovative entrepreneurs in this ecosystem, and so thank you for your leadership and continued vision in this effort. So Josh, let's talk a little bit more about Common Ground. you mentioned earlier the release and the next film. Tell us a little bit more about the next steps and how can we get the word out about Common Ground to our friends and family?
Thanks. Just show of hands, how many people have seen Common Ground? Awesome. Thank you. For the 25% that haven't seen the film and are like, what are we doing here? The film talks about regeneration, specifically regenerative agriculture. And when we look at regenerative agriculture, it is the antithesis of how we grow most of the food that we eat today. So Americans, on average, 65% of our diet is processed and hyper-processed food. The majority of that comes from 4 crops: corn, soy, wheat, and hay. The majority of that is grown on 300 million acres that supports 600 million acres of rangeland, where cattle are mostly grazed for a while, and then for the last year of their life, they're fed corn and other grains. That's the current system of how the majority of calories are produced in the United States. Regenerative agriculture flips that model on its head. It integrates animals back into the ecosystem. It integrates ecosystems back into farming systems, and it integrates farming systems back into ecosystems. And the net result is a multiplier effect where soil is built, biodiversity increases, communities have more money, farmers have agency, and the entire dynamic of our food system changes. And this isn't just a US story, it's an international story. Common Ground we produced during COVID, so the only other country we visit is Mexico, but it's a pretty stunning visit because we go to the Chihuahuan Desert and we show a guy named Alejandro Carrillo, who used to be a computer engineer. He turned into a cowboy and decided to turn the desert green. And he's doing that on 2 million acres. So, yeah, it's awesome. Thank you for clapping. I did nothing other than film. But the point of the story is there's not a lot of environmental technologies that are open source, scalable, they're replicable, they can be learned by anyone regardless of if they're literate, not literate, regardless of the language they speak, and that have the potential to capture the majority of carbon that's in the atmosphere. That's pretty radical. And that's what Common Ground's about. That's what the film's about. That's why we're still excited about it, even though we premiered it 2 years ago, and we've been, I don't know, in 1,000 theatrical openings in 35 countries. And just now, we're finally gonna get to show it to the other 100 million people that haven't seen it. So that's cool. That's exciting. Yeah.
That's fucking great, actually. I mean, I've seen it at least 6 times, and I'm excited to watch it again, honestly. I don't think I've ever learned so much in 90 minutes. Common Ground is literally like a crash course in regenerative agriculture. And it's super entertaining, too. Yeah. And, you know, I'm not even part of the project, but it's just my actual true feelings. Sage, you talked about shopping your project. Tell us a little bit more about that, and where are you going kind of next with your platform? And I know you're in a lot of universities right now, but tell us kind of what's next for Sage, and how can this room help you accomplish your goals?
Well, I was planning on having 2025 be a big media year. We were, hoping to get the docuseries off the ground, and also shopping not shopping, but I don't know, that word's just running around here. But in the early stages of talking about like a high production podcast, because I think something that I have been marinating over for a long time is the idea of just having sort of a propaganda machine. And I use that word very neutrally because I think there's propaganda machines about everything. There's propaganda machines about skincare for acne, right? And you have to be, if you're looking at it from a marketing perspective, you have to be exposed to things like I don't know, 7 times, or it's like 7 hours of watch time or something, for you to be really bought into a vision. And so I don't think that we have the sort of environmental leadership in the public eye that we need. That being said, I mean, the landscape is changing so rapidly, and we're seeing a lot of censorship that's concerning, and I'm curious as to where that's going to go. So we'll see if 2025 actually ends up being a media year after all. We have a nonprofit that was sort of our first step after Berkeley. I was sort of like, okay, this is so phenomenal. We have these, testimonials, and it's changed so many people's lives. Where do we take it next? So we are working with universities, restricted universities, just because that's kind of like biting off what we can chew. But I would love for it to be more accessible than that. But we do work with universities on helping them to sort of solutionize their existing environmental education, and then also, maybe infuse it into the business school or whatever that ends up looking like. So we are in 12 universities right now. And I guess, yeah, it's more so about building out that strong propaganda arm, continuing to grow on social media and these sorts of things. I'm also getting into climate finance, so that's kind of just me wanting to work my brain a little harder. But also, I think shaping my theory of change, and kind of what I was saying earlier, we need carrots, not sticks. And so, what does it take to find, build, fund, synthesize the types of companies and infrastructure and public and private markets that actually make sustainable options easier and sexier and whatever, right? So sort of that theory of change, insofar as right now, at least in the United States, legislating against or suing or whatever it is for environmental wins is going to be less and less likely. That means that we need to move, more towards, the incentive side than the disincentives, or the bans, and what I'm trying to say. So it's just shaping that theory of change, I guess. So if you have interest in any of these things, come by me.
Sage, how can people find you? How can people find you?
I'm on social media, Sage Lenier. My last name is Lenier. But you could also come grab my email from Kwasi or Michael if you're interested in chatting more.
So Mike, your new project, Low Carbon Initiatives, one of our sponsors for this amazing dinner, you invested in a company called R-Cup that has a sustainable solution for single-use plastics. Why did you invest in that company? And tell us a little bit more about your vision for low carbon initiatives and the kind of things that you want to support.
Yeah, so there was an election, and maybe for context, I am from DC, so I keep going back to that. I wanted to do something, and I felt like Bridge to Renewables really focused on transportation, how everything moves around. Low Carbon Initiatives is really focused on food, water, energy, and regenerative agriculture, and how it is all tied together. But it's also a venture that really leans on data. I believe that over the next decade, call it, that we are now truly in a data-rich environment. Data around impact, data to inform policy, all of it is now at our fingertips. So with R-Cup, it was really an investment to support sustainable music industries. When you go to a concert, right, like R-Cup is in 16 cities, Kwasi and I are working feverishly to launch them in Austin. And in every single city, they build a washing hub that's accessible jobs. They're plastic cups, they're used 1,000 times at venues. R-Cup they opened for the Sphere in Vegas. The founder of the company was a roadie with U2, got the band to basically demand that we use these cups, and the message around, seeing live music, like that's a memory that can last a lifetime, but the impact around that event doesn't have to. And that's what really got me to lean into our cup. And I think it really ties into the work that Josh has done with Common Ground in bringing in celebrity as the face of sustainability and getting people to really latch onto that, because you may not necessarily care what happens to that plastic cup, but if the guy you're here to see and drove X many hours and are spending your money, your time, your experience, like if he's a fan, the chances, or she, the chances of you returning that plastic cup and getting on board increases tenfold. And what really amazed me about our cup is that these crazy, large venues, concert halls, they have about a 96% return rate. Phenomenal. I do not have a cup with me tonight, but it's literally just a plastic cup. It's a durable one. They have invested in AI to scan the cups. And more importantly, like they're brandable per the venue. So we're very excited about leaning into this project. I'm thrilled to have LCI behind it, Low Carbon Initiatives, and hopefully our cup will come to the live music capital of the world in Austin at some point next year.
Yeah, well, dinner's ready, guys. So I think it's time to eat. This has been an amazing panel.